was available for us to start our new Rotary year. It's a topic that we've tried to advertise and broadcast significantly, and a sensitive subject for anybody that might be concerned with it. So again, I'm glad that Collyer was available to share it with us today. And for those, I think everybody except maybe Bob. I don't know if Bob knows Collyer or not.
I do not.
Collyer is a past president of the Ann Arbor Rotary Club. He's very actively involved with the district. One of his newest charges, I believe, is in the End Polio Now efforts. He'll probably talk a little bit about that. This morning, his topic for the day is parents' journey into, don't have it in front of me.
Mental health.
Mental health. I wanted to use the right last word. I think after you hear the message that you'll understand that it's something that isn't talked about very much and just needs more awareness on everybody's part. So I hope you appreciate Collyer's comments this morning. And with that, Collyer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Phil, and thank you all for this opportunity to share my story on a journey in mental health. Sadly, a journey too many parents have taken. Just to follow up on the polio, yes, I've been involved in the polio by an obscene amount of winning money to the polio bear. I don't know if you've all raised money with that polio bear, but we did that, and my wife says we won the bear, and I said, well, it's not exactly winning it. We put in a lot of money for it. So my story. This is a picture of our son, Cam, when he was 2 years old. We were having a tender father-son bonding moment when one of my good friends and neighbors came in with a camera and said, "Picture time," hence our expressions. However, this turned out to be one of my favorite pictures of Cam. I have it on my dresser. What's that?
Good photo.
Well, thanks. It's I have it on my dresser, and as Cam was progressing through the Ann Arbor Public Schools, from time to time I would look at this picture and reflect, I wonder what Cam will be when he grows up. I wonder what his likes, his interests, and his passions will end up becoming. And I wonder, as a dad, how I can best help and support him as he goes through adolescence and young adulthood. So you can only imagine the distraught that my wife Annie and I had, that by the time Cam became a senior in high school, he ended up looking like this. The mental health challenges he faces doesn't necessarily show up in a picture, does it? Annie and I are not certain when Cam first showed signs of depression and anxiety, but by 8th grade and throughout high school, we were doing everything we could to get him the support and help he needed to manage through this debilitating disease. Now, for some, not all, but for some, particularly young male adolescents with depression and anxiety, they take it upon themselves to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. And for some, not all, this self-medication of drugs and alcohol becomes a full-blown addiction, which is where Annie and I found ourselves with Cam his freshman year in college. Now, for those who have ever had to live with an alcoholic or an addict, then you surely know what Annie and I were going through. Living with an alcoholic or an addict is depressing. It's draining both mentally and physically. This disease breaks trust and shatters families. And the only thing worse, if anything could possibly be worse, is there's no cure. Cam and people like Cam will suffer through disease for the rest of their lives. Cam realized he had a problem, and he did seek help with a rehab center. And all the parental optimism you could possibly imagine, only to see that parental optimism erode after one relapse, after another relapse, and then back into rehab, mustering up our parental optimism to once again see that erode from one relapse after another relapse. Finally, enough was enough. And my wife, Annie, found this unique program outside of Bend, Oregon. It was set in the mountains and in the forest where young men like Cam would work with therapists on their depression and anxiety, certainly their addiction, but also the therapist would help them develop a foundation of life and coping skills so many of us take for granted. About a month and a half into Cam's recovery, we were requested to come out to Parents Weekend. Annie and I eventually found the campsite, and we saw Cam after a month and a half, and he looked great. His skin, his pallor, his eyes, his demeanor, I don't know what you call joy and relief and smack them together, but that's how Annie and I felt. We gave Cam a big hug, and Cam looked at us and he said, "Mom and Dad, pick up your sleeping bags and allow me to escort you to your new accommodations." So we followed Cam up this hill, and I must admit, I was kind of fascinated where this was going to lead. And then at a plateau, he says, "Mom and Dad, lay out your sleeping bags," which we did. And then he takes a tarp and he weaves it into these branches to form a canopy over the sleeping bags. And I looked at Cam and I said, "Cam, a tarp, not a tent?" "No, Dad, no tent." "Well, then no tent must mean there's no bears." "Oh, no, we have bears. But see, what we do is we take a rope. Cam, what am I going to do with a rope with a charging bear? No. We take the rope and we throw it over a high branch." "Kim, are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious." Then we tie up our food and we hoist it up. "Well, Cam, that is just terrific for the food, but what about your mom and me?" "Dad, don't worry about the bears. Everything will be fine. Now follow me. I got to show you something really cool." So that's great, Cam. So we go and follow him down to the campsite. And then he comes up with this contraption, the wildest thing I've ever seen. He's got this rock with a little indentation. And in the indentation, he puts a stick that he can twirl, and they've sharpened the stick at the end to a sharp point. He then has another rock that they've hollowed out, which I have no idea how they hollowed out this rock, into a rock bowl. They put the tip of the stick into the rock bowl, and then Cam, with a leather strap, goes 1, 2, 3, and there's a hot ember. Cam then takes dead grasses and dead leaves into the rock bowl, and then with the hot ember, they catch on fire. He takes the contents of the rock bowl, throws it on the kindling, and that's how they start their campfire. Am I the only one who thinks this is cool? I said, "Cam, let me try this." So I take the rock with the little indentation, twirl the stick with the tip, put it in the rock bowl, then take the leather strap and go 1, 2, 3. There's no hot ember. All right, well, maybe I need to put a little more enthusiasm into it. So I take the rock with the indentation, twirl the stick, put the tip in the rock bowl. 1, 2, 3. There's still no hot ember. At this point, I'm looking around and I see Cam and his colleagues and the therapist gathering around me as though I'm this evening's entertainment. But I didn't care. I was going to figure out how to start a fire. So I take this rock and the indentation, twirl that stick, put the tip into the rock bowl, and this time we're starting a fire. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's still no hot ember. I looked at Cam, I said, "Cam, you used this stick up." At which point, everyone is cracking up and laughing. None more joyous than my son's Cam's. Even the therapists were laughing. They apparently had not seen a dad like me. I shared this story because these are good kids. Well, I call them kids, they're young adults. They are courageously battling their depression, anxiety, their mental health challenges. Their brains that were skyjacked or hijacked with drugs and alcohol, after a month and a half, their personalities are revolving. They're interesting, they're intelligent, they're funny, and they're fun to be around. But we can't just take our kids who've been in this bubble environment, yank them out, bring them back home, and think they'll succeed, because they won't. They're just on the first leg of their journey of getting clean and sober. The second leg is where the rubber meets the road. On this segment, they'll work with different therapists into a new facility with some new other young adults. The therapist will continue working on their depression and anxiety, certainly their addiction, but they're going to further develop those life and coping skills, because now they either have to get a job or they have to go to school, and all the accountabilities and responsibilities that go along with that. Now, the therapists aren't just going to throw them out there and say, figure it out. They're going to be there to support them, but they still have the accountability and responsibility to make sure that they follow through either with a job or with school. 5 months into Cam's program, we got a call and said, we would like you to come out to Parents Weekend. So we went out to this new facility, saw Cam once again. He looked great. We gave him a big hug, joy and relief smacked right back together. At this point, Cam requested, he really wanted to come home for the holidays for Christmas. Well, what parent doesn't want their child home for Christmas? So Annie and I said, okay, Cam, you set up a meeting with your therapist, lay out your case, and then we'll support you. So Cam set up a meeting, laid out his case very logically, and at the end of his proposal, you could have heard a pin drop. Finally, one of the therapists, who was a Navy veteran who Annie and I really enjoyed getting to know, turned to Cam and he said, Cam, that is the worst idea I've ever heard. And I'm thinking, wow, I just told Cam I would support him, and now I'm getting a therapist saying this is the worst idea. And then he explained, the reason why it's a bad idea, Cam, is that during the holidays, particularly during Christmas, there is so much stress and anxiety that just triggers relapses. Well, that made sense to Annie and me, and it also made a little bit sense to Cam. However, as I thought about it, we can't just keep our kids in a bubble environment for the rest of their lives. First off, unless you're a hedge fund manager, nobody can afford it. And secondly, we have to continually transition our kids so that by the time they get into the communities that they're going to live and work in, they have every opportunity in becoming successful. So we agreed Cam would not come home over Christmas, but rather mid-January. I picked up Cam January 10th at Detroit Metro Airport. Wasn't sure which Cam would show up, because relapses just love newfound freedom, and Cam had about 5 hours of newfound freedom. I see him at the luggage area. I give him a big hug, and he was fine. We had a nice discussion on the way home from the airport, and as it was really late, we went to bed, and then the next morning we got up late, had breakfast. Then Cam shared with us that he wanted to see his two best friends that he's known since grade school. These are good kids. Now they're young adults. We knew them. They're good kids, and we knew their parents. So Annie and I said, okay, that's fine, Cam, but we want you home by 6 o'clock at night because we're going to have dinner together. So Cam said, that's fine. At 5:20, Cam came home, and he was fine. We had a nice dinner, good conversation. After dinner, Cam wanted to see another friend of his that he knew from high school, who we also knew. He struggled immensely with high school and grades. However, he was gifted with his hands. So he worked at the Ann Arbor Airport as a mechanic as well as Willow Run. And he was making a lot of money for someone his age. He had two young daughters who we met. So I felt good about this relationship with Cam because he could see what accountability and responsibility really looks like. So we said, okay, Cam, that's fine, but we want you home by midnight. Well, midnight came, and there's no Cam. 10 after 12, we started texting and started leaving voicemail messages. 12:30, Cam finally came home. And I have to tell you, the experience that Annie and I've had, we can tell in a nanosecond if there is a problem with Cam just by the way he walks or way he goes. I couldn't discern a problem. I just remember saying, Cam, we'll talk about this in the morning. And let's also go out to Liberty Sports. We'll shoot some baskets, lift weights, do something physical. Okay, Dad. So the next morning, we agreed that we'd do this around 10 o'clock. I'm down in the basement doing work, Rotary work, probably answering emails. And next thing I know, it's 10 after 10 and just getting sucked into this. And I know that never happens to anyone in this call. So I just shoved down the laptop, raced up the basement stairs, yelling, Cam, raced up the stairs up to his room. Cam, come on, let's go play basketball. Go down the hallway, and in his doorway, I see him, and he's sound asleep, just like high school. And I just remember in high school, I'd have to go in his room, Cam, come on, you got to get up, you got school today. And as I got close, he'd jump up and scare the bejeebies out of me. But as I got halfway through the room, I realized something wasn't quite right. And as I got closer, his pillow was straight up and pasted to his face. When I went over with the detective and got to the part where I can tell in a nanosecond if there's something wrong with Cam just by the way he walks or talks, he said, Mr. Smith, I have to interrupt you right there. This is what I do. And there are times when I can't even tell if our kids are on something. In fact, we have evidence that Cam did purchase heroin, and the autopsy came back that Cam died of an overdose. Not so much the heroin, but what the heroin was laced with, that many of our kids have no idea. And it's been laced with this drug called fentanyl, and that was the cause of death. If you're not familiar with fentanyl, I'm not a doctor, but the best explanation is fentanyl is used as an elephant tranquilizer. Cam weighs about 150 pounds. Elephants weigh over 2.5 tons. Every parent who ever wanted to be a parent believes their kid is 1 in a million. And we felt that way with Cam. However, Cam wasn't 1 in a million. He was 1 in 67,367, because 67,367 of our youth died of an overdose in 2018. Let me share with you from the Centers of Disease and Control. Can you see that? If you can, just thumbs up. You see that? Okay. So this is from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. And if you look on the far left is 1999, there's about 16,600 of our youth died of a drug overdose. You can see the rapid expansion of the deaths, overdose deaths, throughout the years, particularly the last 4 years. And you see a big spike in the last 4 years on the right, and that's all due to fentanyl being introduced to the either cocaine or other drug. 67,367. Well, hey, it came down from the year before. That 67,367, I would tell you, is 67,367 of our youth too many. That's more deaths than entire deaths of Vietnam. And I ask myself, and I ask all of you, do you think we can just put a lid on the 67,367 who have died, who had the anguish and the despair, and just bury that with them? Or do you think that in addition to the 67,367 of our youth that have died, there are other people that care? Like their brothers and sisters, their 2 best friends that they've known since grade school, their cousins, aunts and uncles, and yes, their parents. By the time you add up the multiplying effect of all the people that are in despair and anguish, this lid would crack, splinter, and shatter into millions of people. So when someone tells me that 67,367 is a statistic and it's a number, this is what a statistic and a number looks like to us. At CAM's memorial service, Reverend Melissa Ann Rogers stated there will be no answers to our why questions. Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we see this happening? Why? And if we just let those why questions remunerate over and over and over again, we will go down a black abyss into despair, depression, and desolation. I wish I could have taken her advice, but it was very difficult. For a year, that's basically where I lived, was in despair, depression, and desolation. However, living in despair, desolation, and depression isn't living. And so, with the support of so many friends, mostly a lot of people from Rotary, was able to kind of crawl out of this abyss. And one particular friend was the past district governor, who Barry Frazier is on. He said, Collyer, when you're ready, I want to start a mental health initiative. And give me a call and we'll start developing this mental health initiative. So the timing was right after a year, and I reached out to Barry. And as we put together a team, it started evolving. And we did panel discussions, presentations, a newsletter that was added resources throughout the community. But as we were going through it, I realized mental health organizations, they're very well run, but they tend to be, they do this one does this one thing, and this mental health organization and another mental health organization does that. Wouldn't it be better, and wouldn't it be more of an impact if we could gather all these mental health organizations so that we can raise the level of mental health awareness to physical health? Because mental health isn't a choice, it's a disease, it's an illness. So as we evolved the discussion, a person in our group said, well, why don't we do the Ann Arbor Marathon? And by the way, the Ann Arbor Marathon pulls people from all over the world, mostly from Michigan, Ohio, and Southwest Ontario. Let's do an Ann Arbor Marathon, and we'll solely dedicate the race to mental health organizations. I thought, wow, that is really great, but you probably have to go to a board and all that. I mean, is this something you really can do? And she looked me right in the eye and she said, Collyer, I'm the president and CEO. Of course we can do this. So guess what? We are going to do a race to erase mental health stigma for the Ann Arbor Marathon in 2021. So it's March 21st, 2021. I'm hoping that the COVID-19 works its way through so we can do this, but it is going to be a race solely dedicated to the mental health organizations. This is how it'll work. The race will be March 21st, 2021. There are runners and walkers. Now, I can't run a marathon, but I'll have every opportunity to walk or whatever I want to do. There's a marathon, a half marathon, a 10K, a 5K, and you can walk any part of that. The great thing about it is that $3 of the registration fee will go back to the mental health organizations that an organization or runner wants to provide to. In addition, the mental health organizations will have an opportunity to coordinate with the Ann Arbor Marathon with their own Facebook page and their own raising funds and awareness. The day before, which I'm really excited about, is that there's a huge expo that they do before the race, the day before. Last year, over 3,000 attended. The mental health organizations will get free space. They can share their information, what their organization does. We're looking to have some big name speakers presenting during that day. And so they will have a free opportunity. It won't cost them anything to share their information. And then finally, the excitement that we're going to have with the mental health organizations and bringing this out, we really want to tap into our youth, particularly high school students and college students. And the reason why I say that is when I've presented to high school or college students, I ask, do you know anyone with mental health challenges like depression and anxiety? All their hands raise up immediately. They don't even look around. If I ask the same question with adults, they tend to kind of look around and maybe raise their hand. So they're very much in tune to this, and I really want to tap into the Interact and Rotaract groups. And Cindy Hill, who's on, is going to help me with the high school, and I'm also working with college with some others, and any support that you guys can provide, I certainly would enjoy that immensely. Why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? So that the people we care most about and would do anything for, their voices will continue to be heard. Thank you again for this opportunity to share my story. And Phil and Lynn, I'll be glad to take any questions, any comments that anyone has, and I'll go from there. Thank you again.
While everybody's thinking about the questions they might want to ask Collyer, I saw your presentation for West Bloomfield, and obviously again today, and certainly have some feelings about the whole issue. And your presentation mentioned the why. And I'm wondering what anybody, ourselves included, can relate to or do or participate in to get over that lump of is there education that needs to be further done, or activities? But why does it happen to the young people that it obviously happens to?
Well, that's a great question.
Question to come back to, but go ahead.
That's a great question. I think when someone has depression and anxiety, they're losing hope. And somehow we have to bring that hope to them to get over this. And I don't have all the answers, obviously, but I do know that we did everything we could. I really feel confident about that. And sometimes, you know, the worst thing can happen. It does happen. As far as with me and Annie, the support that we have, I got to tell you, the stigma is so intense that when we went to the memorial service, I didn't even want to look up because I was so, sorry, I wasn't sure anyone would show up except immediate family. But that wasn't true. And that's what taught me, and where I learned that you really have to lean on the support of friends and family. A lot of Rotarians, a lot of people at church, and it was such a great feeling. And it did take me a while, but with that support, I think you can't do it. You're not an island. You just can't do it on your own. And there are some support groups. We certainly went to Alcoholics Anonymous primarily, and that was a good support group. But I can't tell you, the friends really helped us out. And it's not so much, hey, if you need any help, you just call me, because we're not. I mean, we're so wrapped up in our pain. It's the ones that said, hey, you know what, let's go grab some coffee, because I want to share some things and learn more about what you're going through, or, you know, something like that. It's actually doing something. And I think that really helped us immensely. So.
One other thing that I was impressed with was the chart that you showed of the deaths over a period of time.
Right.
In your comments about it's not only affecting those that died. Obviously, they're a direct impact, but when you accumulate those numbers, and I didn't try to add them up, but the impact that has on a community, generally on society, is tremendous. And therefore, I think that there probably can be more done with financial backing of whatever kind can be generated, like your marathon and other things. But just getting the message out to all the people that are affected, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever they may be, they're all affected. It has an impact, and it has a long range result. So I don't know if you have any direct comments on that or
I think when I think of with all the support and going through this and getting help, and I originally I was going to just share my story. I mean, this story took about 1.5 years to put together. The first time I presented it, I couldn't even present it. I stood up and then Annie said, "Come on, you can do it. You tell it," and I couldn't. And then the second time, I eventually got through it. And once I got through it, I mean, it was tough. I started getting feedback and evolving it. And what I found is I was originally just going to tell the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor because of all the support they had and stop there. But then I realized people are coming up to me and say, "Hey, I'm so glad you shared this story. I'm going through it now." So I know it's making an impact just sharing the story.
Right. Anybody else? Questions?
Yes, it's Barry here. Speaking, I know this is all about Collier's story today. Collyer, but I want to share something from background regarding Rotary, the stigma. And he's referenced stigma many times here. And I also note that Collyer chose to present his story to a Rotary Club. Well, now to think back, it's now 6 years ago since I shared my story with my Rotary Club. And that was the first time I ever told of my story of my father committing suicide. Well, it's now what is it? It's 58 years ago. I went through pretty well all my life talking to nobody about it because of the stigma. And now when I think back, you just think around us these days. I know in Canada, I know in the US, the stories are being shared all the time now, just in these last 6 years, and especially 3 years, when I shared my story again at the district conference, and just 2018. Not knowing then about Collier's story. And then it just seemed as though there was enough energy at the district conference in 2018 in Ypsilanti that there should be continuing on with a district mental health committee. So I chaired that first committee 2018, 2019. That's only 2 years ago. And so that's how Collyer and I became much more aware of each other. And now, of course, we're hearing and from Collyer and Collyer sharing his story across the district. So I just want to acknowledge that to you, Collyer, because your experiences are valuable. And I'm thinking especially with the younger generation, and especially with Rotaractors and Interactors, and which I know is going on. So I applaud you, Collyer, for continuing to move on your mission here.
Thank you, Mary. I can't imagine when you were growing up at 14 years old, being the oldest of all your brothers. Did you have a sister? I can't remember.
Yeah,
it seemed like
yeah,
brothers, but I know you were
five
the
of us.
oldest.
Yeah, two
in
and two.
Rural agricultural, there was no support, no anything, and except for a stiff upper lip. And for a 14-year-old being the oldest, that's incredible. And we're seeing a lot more resources, and like you said, there's a lot more awareness now over the past 2 or 3 years in particular.
Yeah. So it's all about so you hear a story about timing and acquaintances, and then the common denominator here, of course, is empathy within Rotary.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Cindy, do you have any questions today?
Well, I don't have any questions. I just, I've heard Carl's story several times, and I'm struggling a little bit this morning with it, but emotionally, it just breaks my heart. We've had a number of deaths by suicide in the West Bloomfield community over the years that we've lived here, and it's all related to mental health, all not necessarily related to drug or alcohol abuse, but every parent asks that question, why? You know, I don't understand. And we hear, why didn't the school do something? Why didn't I do something? Why? And you can't answer that question. You just have to know that some things aren't answerable and you move on. And Carl, you're doing such a good job of that, and Barry too, to move through that pain and do something to support other people who might be going through the same thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Well, if nothing else, we can say the subject of the meeting has been covered, and we individually can choose whether we want to stay on the meeting for a few minutes or not, converse between ourselves. Phil, I'll turn it back to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Collyer. That was totally awesome. And I will be contacting you because, well, I'll tell you why. The meeting was great. I loved it. I'll make sure the video is completed and published. You'll be able to point to it, Collyer, for those that can't have you in person or with a Zoom call. You'll be able to send people here to somewhere to see the video of your talk, and I'm sure that'll help other people get the word out on such a terrible subject.
Thank you.
I would like to say, and Vinny would like to just mention that I have some acquaintance with this subject, because 45 years ago, the eldest of my parents' children, Mary Ann, killed herself after 18 tries over a span of about 20 years. So she was in serious depression, finally killed herself. And my brother Kevin, the next oldest after me, he attempted suicide. And then my uncle killed himself. So there was depression in the family. And in the case of Mary Ann, and I think my brother, is because of a highly negative view towards human worth and sexuality in the Roman Catholic Church that I was exposed to. So I know of one source of guilt that was an onerous burden, and I weep to think of my parents. What did they talk about after Mary Ann killed herself? So I know what you're talking about, but I just know of one source of guilt and wishing for death. There must be many, many other sources of that agony, but I have no idea. But I know what parents go through.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, Lynn, you want to, since it's now my turn at the wheel, I just took over as president of Farmington Rotary Club, so it's my duty to start and end the meeting. If you want to hang in, I'll leave the Zoom meeting running if you want to all stay on. If you want to get off the call and continue with your day, that'll be fine too. So if there's anybody who wants to stay, let me know and I'll leave it running. Otherwise, I will stop the recording so that we can have any kind of conversation